Okay, so in the background you can see a bit of how the mapping is for this build. So this is a 200% delirious map with a bunch of breach tablets. This build never lacks any damage from the moment you switch to totems until you hit level 100 if you wanted to push it that far. It has been incredibly fun to play. It is incredibly tanky, incredibly simple to play. You press your totems, you run around, you let your totems kill everything, you pick up the loot, and happy days. In terms of any map mods that it can run, there is nothing it can run. It can run absolutely anything. The map mods don't matter in the slightest. It absolutely shreds every single piece of content in the game. This is a pretty high-end investment version, which you really don't need to do. You can get this damage on pretty much half the budget. The only thing that you kind of need for this build to feel tanky is, I would say, about 7,000 mana. But to get to about 7,000 mana at this point in the league is pretty simple. You can get there with a couple of pieces of gear. It's probably the smoothest build I've played in a long time. It's a one-button build. Yeah, I have Mana Tempest on my bar, but it's hardly ever used. It's kind of just there for, I don't know, if I'm bored and I want to press a different button. The clear on it is pretty good. The bossing's pretty good. Even in 200% delirious with a bunch of map mods, this build struggles with absolutely nothing. I played it since day one, and the thing is about this build as well, every point on the tree that you put into it, every bit of investment that goes into it, you're able to feel it, and it feels, as I was saying, every bit of currency that you put into the build, you're able to feel it, and the more you put into it, the nicer it is to play, the faster it gets, the better the bossing gets. This build is extremely new player friendly. All you need is basically just get spell totem and you're on your way. It's really new player friendly because you're able to only use one button. There's no complicated combos. You take your spark, you take your grim pillars, you put it into your totems, and that's it. You can just forget about everything else, which I think is incredibly nice, because not only is it easy to play in a one button build, it's beginner friendly, and you can scale it to the absolute moon. It is an absolute joy just to see how far this build can actually go. So I wanted to go over why mana is so important in this build. Not only is it important because it is an Archmage build, so the more mana you have, the more damage you have from Archmage, but mana is also your survivability, because when you go mind over matter, all your damage is taken from your mana, so your health pool doesn't matter in the slightest. This could be set to 1, this could be whatever number you want, makes absolutely no difference, because all of the damage is being taken from your mana pool. And the reason we're able to get such a big mana pool is because of Eldritch Battery. So all of our ES, all of our mana is being double dipped basically to convert it all to mana, so we're able to get quite high numbers. In terms of the tree, other ways we can scale the mana so it becomes our damage and our defense, we scale it through all the small note that we pick up int. So the more int you have, the more mana you have, which again scales both your defense and offense, which makes it pretty easy to gear because you're only kind of looking for two things on the prefixes, which would be ES and mana. The rest of them don't really matter in terms of the prefixes for most of the gear slots. There is other ways we're able to scale our mana. We have 3 of these time loss jewels, which are giving us 1% mana each for all these notables that we're able to pick up. And the reason we're able to pick up so many of them for each of these sections is simply due to Entwined Realities, which is absolutely incredible on Oracle. I was saying, you're able to pick up so many of these notes inside of these circles that are giving you so much value that it is kind of incredible. So the way Entwined Realities works is any of these keystones will give you a small circle around them. As you can see, this one is the circle around Mind Over Matter. It highlights when you hover over it. It goes for all of them. And the way this works is you're able to pick up any points inside the circle without needing to be connected. And the reason it works so well with time loss jewels is all these notables that are inside a time loss jewel are getting affected, and they're easy to pick up because of entwined realities. So like you're getting so much points for 1 point basically. So all of these that you pick up are basically giving you 1% mana for each of them, and there's so many of them inside these circles that you're able to pick up because of the way they're positioned. And the important thing about them is they need to be in a very large radius. The bigger the radius you can get, the more area that you're able to cover on the tree, so you're able to pick up more points. It is incredibly fun to play a build like this because it cuts out a bunch of travel points that you're just able to get so much raw power from it. It's the value that this node has is just absolutely incredible. This one here is just the Against the Darkness. This is not needed. This is more high-end investment. You could just completely forget about this section and just kind of ignore that and just pick up more points that are inside your time loss jewels. So I'm not going to go over how to craft these jewels in this video. I'm not going to go over any of my gear, any of it crafted. I'm just kind of doing a showcase of the build. I could go over how to craft some of the gear afterwards. Wouldn't be a problem at all. But yeah, that is the tree. It's a pretty cool looking tree with all the circles. In terms of the Atlas point, or in terms of the Ascendancy points that you pick up, there's a lot of people that end up dropping the +1 to go for crit, but I don't think dropping the +1 and making them die faster is not that great, because in high-end mapping your totems end up dying quite quick or dropping to 0 quite quick. And if you're going to be dropping these 2 points, you have to pick up more survivability for your totems on the tree, which takes away all, not all, but it takes away some of the damage nodes that you're able to get. So I don't think it's needed. You could go for it if you like, but in my personal opinion, I think letting them survive is just a bit better. But in terms of the Ascendancy points, you only really need about three Ascendancy points, or 6, to play the build. So you start off with the +1 and 6 seconds so they don't die. Then you move your way to Entwined Realities. And then from that, like, I didn't get my last Ascendancy point until I was, I don't know, in my mid-90s, because this one doesn't really provide that much bonus to the build, because you're hardly ever taking damage anyway. But if you do take damage at some point, it helps a small bit. So next I wanted to talk about the skill setup that you'll use. In this version of my build, you have very little skills, very low button suppress. It becomes incredibly easy to play. There is quite a lot of expensive supports in here that are not needed at all for the build to play and feel nice. So in terms of the discipline, is actually quite important, because the discipline on your scepter ends up scaling your mana. So this is giving you 278 ES, which ends up being converted to mana, which is a super nice combination with Archmage. It does make the scepter a bit more expensive if you're buying it, but the value is there. And the way we're getting low life is through our curse setup with Blasphemy, which is using that Serious Communion. This is 100% not needed. It gives us a big damage boost because we are low life and we are scaling crit, but it's definitely not needed. You can have Blasphemy and your curse setup on your weapon set before swapping over to this expensive setup, and it feels pretty much the same. It's more of a quality of life thing than anything else, one less button to press, etc. And in terms of Mana Tempest, like I mentioned, I hardly ever press it, but what Mana Tempest does give you, it does give you a nice little boost of damage, and it does drain your mana, so you don't want to stand into it, but we never stand in it anyway, because we have Advancing Storm. So once you cast your Mana Tempest, it moves away, and once it moves away, you won't be draining your mana as if you were standing in it. The other supports are just a +1, less mana cost, increased casting, an Arcane Surge. This last one kind of doesn't really matter what you put in. It's only there for me at the minute because of the Anoint on my amulet, which I will get to in a little while. you can kind of swap this out for anything else that you find useful. Arcane Surge for us at this point in the build doesn't really do much at all. Onto the Spell Totem. So this is the main damage of the build. So this is probably the most important out of all the setups that you want, and the reason it's important is because the supports that you're using need to be almost the exact same, except a Rakiata's Flow, you can swap that out until you're able to get it. But as you can see, the reason we're low life and with Pain Attunement, our crit is absolutely insane. We have almost 800% crit damage bonus, and I can probably get to over 800 if I change a couple things. So the setup that you would use for Spark and Grim Pillars is you need Pierce, because Spark without Pierce is just absolutely horrible to play. Urgent Totems is just more quality of life, because at my point in the build we lost a bunch of totem placement speed, so this is kind of nice to keep up with the placement speed. Rakiata's Flow can be swapped out, it is not needed. Any other damage support is more than enough if you're just starting off the build. And then Mana Remnants. Mana Remnants is actually quite interesting. The reason it's interesting because it's able to overflow your mana. So we're sitting at over 12k at the minute. With Mana Remnants, once it's fully stacked up, we're sitting at about 17, 18k mana once it's at max overflow, which is so nice to play. It not only gives you survivability, it also ends up saving you a lot of the times too. And the supports that are linked to it are just stuff that helps the remnants, which would be Remnant Potency and then Harmonic Remnants, so you can pick them up further away. And then Clarity is only in there at the minute just for a bit of mana regen, because the more mana regen you have in this build, the better it is. And then in terms of the actual character sheet itself, we're sitting at just under 1400 mana without moving. Once we start moving, it's almost at 1600 mana. So our regen is very, very high. Your HP pool, or your mana pool, hardly ever drops below, I would say hardly ever drops below full, to be honest. You regen so much and your totems are taking so much of the damage for you that it's really not a worry. So, but you do want to get mana regen as one of your important stats, because, well, basically it keeps you alive. The more mana you have, the more reckless you can kind of play, the more you can cast, the more you don't really need to worry about getting hit because you just regen it back up. So next I wanted to go over some pieces of my gear. As I mentioned before, all of the important stuff would be just your ES and your mana and your prefixes. All the other suffixes are kind of just a bonus. The one I would rate higher than most of them would be intelligence, simply because the more intelligence you have, the more mana you have, the more damage you have, the more survivability that you have. It's kind of the same as you can go over all the pieces of gear. It's more or less the same. You have as how much as ES you can get, mana, intelligence, and in terms of the other suffixes, if you don't want intelligence, or if you need to fix your resistances, just go get your resistances fixed. That is kind of the biggest use that Mage Blood gives us, is the ability to not worry about the resistances as much as you would. So again, you can swap this out for Ingenuity and get more mana and probably more res, so I don't really need it at all. This build is totally functional without it. It's just with Mage Blood we end up capping our res. As you can see, there's a massive difference in terms of us being capped or not capped, which just makes it a bit more comfortable to play. In terms of the scepter that you want, I only finished crafting this yesterday. Yeah, it's just a bunch of spirit, mana regen int if you can get it. The other third mod for the suffixes, if you wanted to, you could get the hybrid regen. I unfortunately didn't get it here, but this is more than good enough. There is really nothing else that it does, because none of the scepter mods actually give us damage, so there's no point looking for them. None of the ally extra damage while in your presence is going to affect your totems, so it's kind of just a dead stat, which Can make these a bit easier to find sometimes if people think it's a useless scepter because it has no minion related stuff. Could get a bargain that way. In terms of the other gear that I want to go over, the amulet. The amulet, this one is pretty insane, to be honest. You do not need this level of amulet. Any normal mana stacking amulet with double mana regen, intelligence is going to be more than good enough. And as I was saying, the reason we had Arcane Surge in last time, or in the Mana Tempest, is because of our Anoint. So we get Gem Enthusiast, which gives us 5% mana per 10 blue socket it supports, which is what Arcane Surge is giving us. It's a 10th blue support gem, so that's another 5% increased mana. This is good enough, to be honest. It's not all T1s, but it is more than enough. I'm not going to be swapping this out anytime soon. The same goes for all the other pieces of gear. As I said, you just want as much mana, energy shield, intelligence as you can get. And the only thing that's different is the chest piece. The chest piece is slightly different because you're looking for the 20% increased max mana, which makes a massive difference because this chest piece being 786, it doesn't even come close. Like a mere chest piece doesn't even come close to this. Like 1200 ES, 1250 ES, this beats it every single time, and it's actually quite straightforward to make. I can have a crafting video about this later if anybody's interested, but it's super easy to make. You don't need 3 sockets. 2 sockets is more than good enough. The only thing that you need to remember when you're making a chest piece like this, the soul modifier, the Medvid's tending cannot be taken out. So once you're finished making it, it unfortunately has to stay there. But it doesn't matter. The amount of mana this gives you is absolutely incredible. Commander's Touch, again, not needed. You could go to Dream Fragments and the build would feel similar, maybe even better if you're running against Chill Ground stuff, which Chill Ground can be very, very annoying. But yeah, in terms of the ring, then the mods that you want is, again, just as much mana. It doesn't have to be this base. Any mana ring with mana mods is more than good enough to get started. Like, you could just use a Dream Fragment with a normal ring with, say, 150 mana, some res cast speed, and you'd be more than good enough. Build would feel really nice after that. In terms of the flasks, there's no point in us running a life flask because our life doesn't matter in the slightest. The only reason I'm running this mana flask is because it gives one less button to press. It doesn't actually give us that much mana regen. As you can see, it's only 15.5, but it's one less button to press. So that's kind of the only reason that it's there. Yeah, it's a small bit of quality of life than anything. And in terms of the runes that are going into it, all I did was just put in more mana. The more mana, the better. You could swap these out for anything else that you need. If you need resistance, put in resistance runes. That's really about it. The only different runes or idols that you would use would be in the helmet. Or soul cores would be the mana, max mana. For this level of helmet, I've tested it. Another 3% max mana is not better than the max mana per intelligence, but that is very expensive, which you do not need again. So you could just do double 3% and become 6. It won't be as much mana, but it'll be about 100 times cheaper. And in terms of the rat pith, you have it corrupted for double mana mods. Those are the only ones that matter. The additional cost doesn't matter for your totems because you're not actually applying it at all, and you get so much crit and so much bonus crit per 100 mana, especially once you start getting over 8k mana. This becomes absolutely absurd value. Nothing comes close to beating it in terms of damage. Not even close. Not even a perfectly good wand will come close to beating this damage. So that would be your end game shield, your end game focus. These are not that expensive at the moment, but I would definitely recommend getting one if you can. It makes such a huge difference to how the build plays and feels. definitely should be quite up there in terms of the priority, in terms of upgrades for the build. One last thing I wanted to talk about is the level of your spell totem. Because we don't really need it to level past 14, and the reason you put it to 14 or not any higher is because you get +1 totem limit at 14. So any plus levels that you have on your build, on your amulet, has to be taken into account, because that ends up increasing the mana then if you go over level 14. So because I have a +4, the spell totem itself is only level 10, and the only reason to even level spell totem above level 14 is it gets more resistances the higher level it gets, because the next breakpoint for +1 totem is at 22 or 23. Again, it's totally not needed, because at this point you don't have enough spirit to cast more than 4. You don't even need to cast more than 4. So I would definitely keep it at a lower level, because it costs less mana to cast the totem, and it also ends up being less a requirement for your strength, because there's a little bit of a strength issue if you're trying to just focus purely on intelligence. So having this lower level helps you sort that out. I think that is everything I wanted to talk about today. So if anybody's still watching towards the end, well, thanks for watching. There's been quite a lot of information that's been put into this video about the build and how the build feels and the character itself. Anybody got any questions about the build? Let me know. Thanks.